What's up, people? We're back again for another YouTube video, but this ain't no ordinary YouTube video. I've pulled out all of the stops for this video. This is the UFC 300 OG show. What I mean by that is I'm bringing in all the OGs for this video. I said I want to do something very special for UFC 300, and I've been doing that this week. I've been going live every single day. I've been doing a live stream every single day on YouTube when I only usually do 1 or 2 per week, and been breaking down different aspects of the fight, giving out bets, etc., all of this content, right? But I wanted to do something special. And I thought, what better way to do it than to give you a video where I highlight all of the OGs in this game. So if you've been familiar with me for a while, for at least 4 to 6 weeks, I did a YouTube live stream about 4 weeks ago now, where I broke down an entire UFC card with about 5 up-and-coming cappers. Now, I didn't know any of these guys. They were just up-and-coming guys who people DM me about, or they DM me themselves, because I wanted to highlight some new guys coming up in the space. But it got me thinking, all right, I've highlighted the new guys in the space, but what about all of the old guys who have been here for a long time, been here before me, paved the way for me? Why ain't they getting highlighted? And obviously they got their own shows, etc., etc. They're already established, but no one's making a show for them. But I did make a show for the up-and-coming cappers. So I thought to myself, all right, I'm going to make an OG show. I've shouted out these new cappers, but I'm going to shout out some old cappers at some point. And UFC 300 Fight Week rolls around, and I thought to myself, what better week to do it for than this week? So that's exactly what this video is going to be. This video, we're going to be speaking to multiple cappers or content creators that have been in the game long before me. At the end of the day, the only reason I make content is because people came before me and made content. They paved the way. They kicked the doors open. If they wasn't doing it, most likely I would have never been inspired to do it. Would I have been the first person ever to do it? Probably not. I'll probably be doing something else. So I want to give those people who came before me their flowers. I want to shout them out. And I think this is going to be a good show for everybody, because I'm not only going to be speaking about fights with them, but I'm also going to be speaking with them about their origin story, etc., etc. Now, I'm not going to be able to get on every single OG because there's a lot of them, or there's about 10 like established OGs that came well before me. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to fit all of them in, but I'm going to do my best for you. And this is going to be a bit of a different show. I've never done a show like this before for the most part, outside of the new Kappa highlight show. So hopefully you enjoy this show. And obviously we're going to be touching on some fights to hopefully help you make some money, as I'm always trying to do. So get ready for a banger of a show. I'm going to bring in my first guest now, and let's get into it. Okay, so let's kick this show on the road. We've got UFC 300, and for the first guest of the show, I'm bringing in someone who came before me, just like everyone on this show. He's an OG of the game. His name is Marley. How are you, brother?
Hey, man, I'm good. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it. It's good to be on with other sharp minds. I see you taking over the game now. So I'm glad you think of me as an OG. I appreciate it.
Yeah, man. Like, there's a few people who had in mind to get on this show. And, I've reached out to everybody. Most people I was able to get on. So, yeah, I appreciate you coming on, man. Like, I felt like there's always new cappers coming through, like every day, right? There's someone new on Twitter, someone new on YouTube. But I wanted to give homage to the people who came before me, because without the people who came before me, I wouldn't be doing this myself. I remember listening to Dan Levy's Half the Battle, and he used to have you on as a segment, like late into that podcast, and you used to come on and speak about, things from I think it was from a DFS perspective. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yep. The big Marley minute. Yeah.
Yeah. The big Marley minute. I remember that old school. So like, if it wasn't for shows like that, if it wasn't for you, Dan, etc., I probably wouldn't have a YouTube channel myself. So, I just want to say shout out to you for that. I appreciate you for that. And going off on that, I want to ask you how you came to be an MMA gambler, how you came to be someone who makes content online about gambling. Because I'm really interested in, like, everyone's got a completely different story. I know my story is completely different from anyone I've ever spoken to. And I don't think I've heard your story personally. So if you could let us and the viewers know, that would be appreciated.
Yeah, man, I go way back to like the start of the MMA community, I'd say, on Twitter. I don't even know when I started Twitter, but just originally I would post my bets every week on Twitter. I'd probably hashtag whatever the card was and throw every bet down for free. And that's kind of how I started building my following in the community. And then DraftKings came along, DFS, and I started doing well in that. You start posting some screenshots, your following starts growing even more and more. But it was always started with the bets. I grew up around gambling with my dad, actually, with sports betting. So even as a young kid, I was interested in sports betting. But I didn't really know about fights as a kid. I loved watching fight movies and stuff. If there was a fight in school, you better believe I was trying to watch it. But I didn't even know there was like an MMA sport or anything like that. So it was always like in NBA, NFL that I was kind of following, and I would follow his bets and just kind of learn from him. And then maybe early 2000s came along, and I don't even remember which fights I saw. I know the tough fight with Forrest Griffin and Stephan Bonner was the one that really got me into it. I was one of those people that was flipping through channels and I saw it. I'm like calling my boys up, like, holy shit, you got to check this fight out. These guys are
that actually happened, because Dana White always speaks about that. He says people were calling up, and it seems just like propaganda, but
no, that was real.
You was actually doing it. Oh, fair enough.
Man, because there was like a guide you could go to, and it would scroll, and you could figure out what was on TV if you wanted to wait as this guide scrolled. So I would just always flip through channels, and that's how I found it, just flipping through. And then I called up. I know I called up at least one buddy. But yeah, I remember that got me into it. And then all the Ultimate Fighter seasons I was super interested into, but I want to say Tough 5, the Nate Diaz season, that's when I started watching MMA religiously. And I would watch any kind of show I could find from any organization. Fighting just kind of became my life. And then when I became old enough to start betting, I mean, allegedly I might have been, gambling even younger, but gambling came legal here. I don't even remember, probably 5-6 years ago or something like that. And I had already built up my name through Twitter. And then Luca Fury, actually, he came before me. He stepped aside from selling his MMA bets. So I kind of figured, hey, this is perfect time to step in right now. Not a lot of people are doing this. And it kind of caught fire. Nick Kalikas over at MMA Odds Breaker, he brought me in over there. We started selling for them. And then I started selling over at Covers as well. And I just caught fire. My following just started growing and growing. My haters started growing and growing. And then I got more involved on the DFS side. I started working for sites along the way over there as well. So it kind of all just fell in my lap, all thanks to Twitter, I would say. If I never got on Twitter, none of this would have ever happened. I don't even love being on camera. It just kind of happened to being on Twitter. People would ask me to come on shows and stuff. And I like talking with people. I wouldn't want to do one by myself. You're really good at talking to the camera by yourself. That doesn't seem like something that I would be good at. But I like getting on and talking to guys like you and Dan. Anybody that wants to have me on, I always have a good time talking fights.
Yeah, that's an interesting origin story, man. So it seems like not much has changed in terms of how you start to make a name for yourself with MMA betting, because I did the same. It was mainly Twitter, which really boosted me up. And when I started to make content, it was heavily on Twitter. I was also making YouTube videos, but I promoted the YouTube videos on Twitter. And most of the people watching my YouTube videos were from Twitter initially. And, that was quite a while after you came on Twitter. So it's interesting to see, even now, it seems like Twitter is the place for MMA betting. And I think betting in general, that's usually that's where the hub is. There is obviously MMA betting, Instagram and YouTube and stuff. There's a few good guys doing it, AJ MMA experts. But for the most part, it seems like Twitter is the hub of where all the MMA gamblers go and where all the sports bettors go as well. So my question to you is, since you've been on Twitter for a while, Twitter's a crazy place, man. There's so many different niches in Twitter, right? You get absolute lunatics on Twitter, people with no profile pics talking a hella craziness. I'm wondering, if it was always like that when you first came on, because obviously you was on it before me, right? With Luca Fury, etc., etc. Have you seen any major changes on Twitter, or is it just the same old shit, but it's just more people doing it now?
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's worse now just because the sport is bigger. When I got in, it felt like it was a smaller community. I mean, there was maybe 15, 20 names on Twitter that you would follow, and people would talk back and forth, and it would just kind of be like this little MMA circle. But now, like, there's a 15, 20 people selling bets every week, and then they have 15, 20 haters each. So it's been growing. Everything's been growing, I would say. And then the bigger you are, the more haters you're going to get along the way. I see that for you now, man. So like, and it's not going to stop. The more you keep crushing it, the more they're going to keep coming. So the more haters you have, I've looked at it as a good thing over the years. And then you just learn to wipe that stuff out and take all the good things that come with it, you know?
Yeah, I agree, man. Like people, like a few people will message me saying, man, I don't know why these guys are talking shit about you. You know, you've earned me so much money, or you've done this, or you've done that. And I always say the same thing. I'm like, it's just the way of the world, you know? You're going to get love and you're going to get hate. Like I get 90% love. So if there's 10% hate, it's just polarity. It's just the way of the world. It's yin and yang. It's dark and light. You can't avoid it, you know? So people will message me sometimes and say stuff like that. But I'm like, man, it's just the way of the world. And obviously Twitter, you know, going back to Twitter, it's the internet. So it's a place where you can say whatever you want without any repercussions. And you can just kind of like, you know, just basically say the craziest stuff in the world and no one will correct you and people will jump on. But yeah, it's just the internet, isn't it? It's just a weird one though. Joe Rogan speaks about it a lot, speaks about how now there's so many people online and so many people are shoving their opinion down your face constantly. And the human brain is not really designed for that. You know, like if I post a pic like, oh, I think Jamal Hill's going to win this weekend against Alex Pereira, I might get like 25 replies, people calling me stupid. And the human brain is not really meant to deal with 25 people telling you you're stupid, calling you names, etc., etc. So it's like humans are developing this skill of taking in all of this information off like hundreds of people in real time as the human race develops. It's just an interesting thing because I think it's definitely contributed towards like short attention spans and shit like that, you know, because it's just so much information you have to deal with at once.
Yeah. And I would say like that's what's grown more is like there's more people that want their opinions good and bad out there. Whereas back in the day, we would just talk back and forth. Like it was almost like a group message system that everyone could look at type of thing. And now there's just so many people. And I feel like I've fallen off of Twitter to where I don't even know a lot of the people doing it nowadays. I'm still back in the old days with all the people that I talked with 10 years ago. And then I find if you put out good content, I'm going to find it. So I find new people that way, I'd say.
Yeah. And you've stood the test of time, man. So well done. Like sports betting is a tough game, man. You know, like there's highest of highs and lowest of lows, you know, like I've had days where I've lost $100,000. Sometimes people don't even earn that in a year. You know, I've had days where I've won $100,000. Like mentally it's crushing when you go through the L's, but you have to stay in it, as you know, long term, if you really want to make big bucks. So shout out to you. I don't know if I'll be doing it in another 5 years, but because it's fucking stressful, man, but we'll see how it goes. So, you know, going back to the actual bets, you know, that's really what we're here for. You know, the card this weekend is crazy, UFC 300. I've been excited for it for a long time. And as we step closer each night, I'm getting more excited. So is there any fight you want to speak off the bat? You know, we could speak about anything really. But if there's anything that you have a hot take on or like a strong take on, maybe it's better to speak about one of those fights.
Man, I do not have any strong takes. I actually haven't placed any bets yet for this card. I'll be looking into it a lot tomorrow. And I'd finalize everything by Friday if I don't figure it out tomorrow. But I have some spots I've been eyeing here and there. I think that the main event is a pretty good one. I think Jamal Hill could be a good bet, but I mean, we're losing the plus money. So I don't want to miss out on the plus money, to be honest with you. And I'm nervous about the ACL tear that he's coming off of. Yeah. But 5-round minute wise, I don't think that Pereira can keep up with the pace that Hill can set. So I don't want to say that Pereira's knockout or bust because he is the more technical striker of the two. Very good striker, can go hard for 5 rounds. But there's no way he can land 200 plus strikes in a 5-round fight like Jamal Hill could. So I feel like Jamal Hill, without the ACL injury, I would have favored him in this matchup. And it's almost like the ACL injury is what's getting us that plus money. But what do you think about that fight? Because I feel like it's going to be a great main event. It's not the name people were really hoping for a UFC 300, I'd say. But it could play out to be a great fight. And if Jamal Hill ends up winning spectacularly, then that's probably a great thing for the UFC, because that's how he'll build his name on this huge card.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same as you, although I'm not really looking at it through the angle of like 5 rounds, he's going to put up more volume. And the only reason is because I really think someone's getting finished in this fight. So I haven't really put my head into the realm of, 5 rounds, I favor him. Although I have thought about it, if it does go 5 rounds, I'll be very happy with betting Hill at plus money for sure. But I think that his boxing's a little bit cleaner. I think his straight shots are going to be landing on Alex Pereira. I think his jab is going to be landing. The 1-2 is going to be landing. And I just trust Jamal to like force a boxing slugfest or boxing exchanges to which I think he's going to come out on top from. Obviously, Alex Pereira has crazy power. I mean, I was watching back that Jiri fight the other day when I was researching this fight. And like everything he touched Jiri with is just insane power. It's like every leg kick shut his leg off. Within 4 or 5 leg kicks, he was switching stances and completely changed his style. He started actually pressuring and throwing a lot of shots because he just was so damaged by 4 or 5 leg kicks of Alex. And then every time Jiri got touched, he felt it. You could tell his body was shaking. So you have to worry a little bit going up against Alex. I mean, I think his power is so legit, even for light heavyweight, which is crazy because that's a big jump from middleweight to light heavyweight. One of the biggest jumps in the entire UFC in terms of weight class, 20 extra pounds, 185, 205, yeah. But his power is still crazy up at 205. So I'm a little bit worried about the leg kicks and the left hook, as always. But outside of that, I think this is a spot for Jamal Hill to shine, man. And I think he's going to get it done within the first 2 rounds, honestly.
Oh, yeah. I kind of feel like it might go all 5 rounds. So maybe that's a bet I should be looking at, to be honest. But I could just be hoping that, because watching these two go at it for 25 minutes would be fun. And then I got a question for you. If you could only watch one fight on this card, which one would you pick?
Justin Gaethje versus Max Holloway.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not going to take long to answer that one. Yeah, that's definitely the one that I'm thinking is going to be the most exciting. It's the one that I'm the most excited for. I mean, there's so many good fights on this card. I don't want to say how can you not pick that, but how can you not pick that one? I mean, that's just going to go off crazy. But what would be your one?
Well, I do think that's our fight of the night right there. That's going to be a banger. There's no way that's going to be a boring fight. But I can't wait for the Sarukian and Do Bronx fight, man. I'm so pumped for that one. Those are just two guys who I've been on. I feel like I've been on when they were really young, saying that they're going to be future champions. And it took a long time for Do Bronx to get there, but he finally did. And now I feel like Arman's in that same situation. He might get there quicker than Do Bronx did, but if he drops this one, then it might take just as long as Do Bronx did. But I'm still going to stay with this guy as being a future champion. I'm going back and forth on who is going to win that one. But my thing is that I don't think I've ever picked against Oliveira. So I'm just going to stay loyal and pick him for that reason. But damn, man, Arman's a beast. I could definitely see him out wrestling Oliveira for 3 rounds, maybe getting a TKO on the ground. Wouldn't shock me to see him get a rear naked choke or something either. But I just can't wait for that fight. I think that I know that Gaethje versus Holloway is just going to be a banger. It's going to be fun for as long as it lasts. But I have no idea how this Oliveira fight's going to play out. It could play out so many different ways.
Yeah, I think, the Gaethje one's 5 rounds, obviously, which is great. This would be epic if it was 5 rounds as well. I feel like they should have done it 5 rounds. Obviously, UFC 300, they can do what they want, but they've left it 3 rounds. I actually don't think it's going to go the 3-round distance. So I'm not that upset that they haven't made it 5 rounds. But I just felt like this fight, deserves a 5-round moniker. I'm personally on the Arman side. I think that he's going to be able to negate the submission attempts, and I think he's got a big grappling edge. So, but I know you said you'd never picked against Charles Oliveira, but is that even from like back in the day when he was like losing to Paul Felder and Max Holloway in those times, or are you talking like more recently?
Yeah, back. I remember watching him submit Darren Elkins super quick from the bottom with a triangle or an armbar, whatever the hell it was back then. And I was like, holy, that's the slickest submission I've ever seen live right there. And then in his next fight, maybe like Efrain Escudero or something like that. And then he showed his striking skills. And I was like, this kid's like 18, 19 years old. This kid is going to be the future. So I remember calling it, way back then. And yeah, I went through many losses with him as well. But it was nice seeing him get there finally.
Yeah, he's one of the most feel-good stories in MMA. The way he kept fighting, kept persevering, moved weight classes, was known as a quitter, and then he comes back to finish all of the top guys in the division. I think he got a little bit fortunate with the run. He fought like mainly strikers, but obviously the guy's an elite fighter. Are you picking against him for the first time ever, or you can't bring yourself to do it?
Yeah, I think just for the loyalty reason, I'm going to stick with Du Bronx there. But like, if I took out all biasness, I do think that Arman should be favored.
Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I think Arman's going to be able to put on a bit of a clinic on the ground. But man, Du Bronx is a beast. You never know. He might just Benil took him down, but he was able to get back up to his feet. And when he got back up to his feet, he finished him. So he's very dangerous. He's dangerous with every strike as well, which is not that common. He can head kick you. He can teep you in the face. He can teep you in the gut, knockout, like knees to the body, elbows. It's crazy because the guy's like super slick jiu-jitsu guy. I think he's got the most submissions in UFC history, but his striking is super elite, which is crazy.
I actually think he might knock out Arman, actually.
Yeah.
But that's the thing. Like, the striking could be close. Either one of them could knock out the other. But I think if Arman takes down Oliveira, he's still got to worry. But if Du Bronx takes down Arman, Arman he's the only one that's worrying in that situation if Du Bronx is in top. I just can't wait for that one. I think they could play out so many different ways. Two young studs. I mean, I don't even know how young Oliveira is anymore, but I'm so pumped for that fight. And then fights on the prelims, a couple of them could headline a fight night, and we're getting them on the prelims for this UFC 300 card. So I am so pumped for this card. I haven't been this pumped. I mean, I want to say ever almost, because the closer it gets, the more excited I've been getting. But I want to say back for $299, I was pretty pumped up for $299. And I was saying I'm more pumped up for $299 than I am $300. But now I can tell that I'm way more pumped up for $300 than I was for $299.
I think this is a better card. And I went on a Guru's podcast earlier, and then, they said that that's how they felt as well for $299. But it's just because it was the closer one, so you kind of get excited for what's close. Kind of like recency bias, but before it happens. But yeah, this card is crazy. For them to be opening up the card with two former title holders, Davison Figueiredo and Cody Garbrandt, is absolute insanity. I don't know if the UFC have ever done that before. Started a card with two former title holders. I'd put money on no. Yeah. I don't think.
Yeah, I highly doubt it.
Yeah, it's crazy, man. Big fight. Do you think I don't know if you've heard any rumblings, but do you think they're going to change the color of the mat? I've heard they might.
It wouldn't shock me. It was like yellow or something for UFC 200, wasn't it?
Yeah.
I didn't like that, so I hope they do something different. It wouldn't shock me. And then we get the new gloves presentation. That I'm looking forward to that, seeing what that's all about.
Oh, is there? What, they have new gloves coming in?
Yeah, some event around there is doing a new glove presentation. So I think we're going to get some new gloves soon. Less eye pokes.
Oh, okay. Like the curved ones, probably.
Yeah, like Trevor Whitman's or something.
Yeah, that's good. We need that.
Yeah.
So one fight I want to ask you before we stop is, you've been around for a while, like you said, right? You was watching the Ultimate Fighters, etc., etc. You obviously saw Jim Miller compete at UFC 200. Did you see him compete at UFC 100 as well?
Oh yeah. I've been. I mean, I don't even remember. Actually, I do remember. Yeah, UFC 100 was like a GSP card, right?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I was definitely watching UFC 100 live at a bar, I would assume.
Nice.
But yeah, I was at. I don't even remember the numbers, but I want to say I've been watching since like the late teens or something like that in the UFC numbers. Like UFC 19. I don't remember when, but it's been like 20 plus years that I've been watching. And then whenever I got on Twitter, my whole reason for getting on Twitter was to kind of find more like-minded people. And the more I watched MMA, it just kind of took over my life. I still do love NFL, but it became, my whole life was about MMA, and I didn't really follow many other sports. I completely stopped watching NBA, and then I would still watch NFL on Sundays, but I gave up basically every other sport just to watch more MMA. And now I got 2 kids, so I had to kind of fall off of the whole other organizations since they don't have DFS. And now I'm strictly UFC for now, at least until the kids get older and I have a little bit more free time on my hands. But shit, UFC has enough cards as it is, so I feel like I'm in a good spot.
Yeah, that's what happens to a lot of people. They start watching MMA and then 6 months later, they don't watch any other sport, even if they came in with NBA, NFL, football, etc., etc. It's what happened to me. I was a big football fan because in the UK, football, aka what you would call soccer, it's obviously the biggest sport in the world, I think, like worldwide. And it's the biggest sport in the UK by far. Everybody goes up watching football. It's a massive thing, English Premier League. And as soon as I started watching MMA, my peak for my interest for football just dropped dramatically, like year on year. And I don't watch it. I haven't watched the full game in years now. And that's strictly down to MMA. You know, I've heard someone say before, I can't remember who it was, maybe Joe Rogan or someone like that. They said, like, no matter what sport you're at, if a fight breaks out in the stands, everybody stops watching that sport and watches the fight in the stands, meaning that fighting is just something primal in our blood, man. So
oldest sport in the world, really. People just didn't pay for it back in the day. They would just have to do it for their lives.
Yeah, literally, man. You know, modern day gladiators, they call it. And Jim Miller's definitely a modern day gladiator. I'm just looking up the UFC 100 card now. You're right. It was GSP versus Thiago Alves. He won a decision there for the welterweight championship. It was also Brock Lesnar versus Frank Mir when Brock finished him. And then John Fitch apparently was the main event, but no, it can't be the main event. John Fitch against Paulo. Yeah, against Paulo Thiago. So that was the card there. Dan Henderson, Michael Bisping. That was a iconic knockout.
Oh God, yeah. That was one at the time. That was probably the one I rewinded and watched over and over again more than any other moment ever. And because Michael Bisping was an asshole back then because he was coming off of the Ultimate Fighter, and a lot of people just hated him for. He was a coach, I think, on the Ultimate Fighter back then, and people didn't like him from that. And I was one of them, so I was so pumped to see it. But now I'm a big Bisping fan, so looking back, I'm like, man, that was unnecessary, Dan.
Cocky Englishman, you know, like people don't like that sometimes, especially Americans. But you start to warm to us, you know, after a couple of years, etc. That's what happened to Bisping. So let's finish on Jim Miller because he was on that card. He fought Mac Danzig and he won a decision. And then obviously he was on UFC 200 against Takanori Gomi, and he finished that fight. And now he's on UFC 300. So do you think he can make it the three-peat? One thing notable, which is interesting for viewers probably, is that he was a favorite in both those fights. UFC 100, UFC 200. He was a favorite. And now he's an underdog, and a moderate underdog at that, in UFC 300. And he's also 40 plus years old. So do you think he's going to be able to make it 3 for 3, or is he going to lose to Bobby Green?
I'm kind of thinking I might end up betting Jim Miller here. I mean, if it was a pick'em fight, I wouldn't be about it, but plus 150, 40% of the time, man, I think between 40 and 50 is right. So he's going to be fired up for this fight. The crowd is going to be fired up as well. Green is coming off that brutal knockout. That wasn't that long ago either. So I feel like Jim Miller's a little bit more in play for the knockout than he would be had Green took a little bit more time off. And then he could get the submission in any round. I also think that he's live to win the first round somewhat on the feet by mixing in a little bit of takedowns as well. He could grind out the second round. And then let's say Green takes over in the third. The judges, even though they're corrupt, they'll still give it to Jim Miller, 29-28, right?
Yeah, and Bobby Green fights close in these decisions time and time again anyway.
And he might respect Jim Miller a lot too and not fully bring it. You never know. But at plus 150, I'm a little bit interested. I feel like it should be a little bit closer to 45% than 40%. I mean, how much percent do you need to justify a bet? I've been in this game for years, but I'm still learning. You know what I'm saying? I still don't have it all fully down. I mean, if you think there's a 3% edge, are you making that bet?
Yeah, it really depends. For me, it's a combination of the edge and also how confident I am in the play. And that's not from a mathematical point of view. That's just because it allows me to ride out the variance a little bit better. and it allows me to deal with losses better. So, for example, like if I have a 3% edge, but I still think the line should be plus 1,000, I might not bet on it, right? But if I think if I think they're going to win 90% of the time and have a 3% edge, I might still lay that minus 450 or whatever it is, 87%, right? I might still lay that. So for me, it depends. But usually like about 5%. But I sometimes don't prescribe like strict percentages to the fights, which a lot of people don't really understand. But what I mean by that is sometimes I can't break down how much percent I think a fighter is going to win. I just look at the line. I don't think they should be that big of an underdog. What exactly do I think they should be? I don't know. Sometimes it's hard for you to say, but sometimes, like, especially because we've been in the game for a long time, we can look at a line like Jim Miller and say, I don't think it should be plus 150. Like, do you really want me to sit down and say it should be plus 122? Or like sometimes it's not that easy, right? But for me, in this fight, I just feel like 50-50 is about right. Like, yeah, if you want to convince me that Bobby Green should be 55 or something, yeah, I guess so. But like, for me, it's fairly coin flippy, about a pick 'em. So personally, I think there's some value on Jim Miller there. So it seems like we agree basically the exact same thing.
That's good to hear.
Yeah, I bet Jim Miller, and I'll just say that right now. I bet Jim Miller, and I think you don't even need to tape this fight. It's just like Jim Miller's won at 100. He's won at 200. This is written in the stars. This is fate for him to come and win at UFC 300. And Bobby Green is coming off that brutal knockout. That was one of the worst knockouts of the entire year. And it came in December, and it still, beat most knockouts that year. And man, he wasn't looking great against Jared Gordon. That's another thing as well. Before the knockout, he was getting pieced up in the round one for a couple of minutes there. True. Jim Miller hits hard. Like, yeah, I don't know. I like Jim Miller in this spot. It'll be a crazy end to his career if he could get this win.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I think as long as, the line doesn't move too much, I'm probably going to be in on that as well. You just got to root for Jim Miller here. So I might as well back it with my money as well. Yeah.
We think there's value. It's written in the stars. It will be epic to hold that Jim Miller underdog ticket on UFC 300.
Yeah.
Like after it'll be like, man, when he wins, everyone will be like, man, why didn't I bet Jim Miller at underdog odds at UFC 300?
Exactly, you're right.
Bro, after the fight, it's going to seem so obvious that everyone should have played that one.
You're right. I can't miss out on it now. I'm betting Jim Miller. Maybe as soon as we get off of here, I'm laying down at least one unit on there.
All right, man. Well, thanks for coming on again. I really appreciate it. Like I said at the start of the show, big shout out to you, OG of the game. So without you, people like me wouldn't be making content. So I always want to show my appreciativeness for that. Is there anything else you want to shout out before we call it a day, bro?
Hey, thanks again for having me on. Always fun talking with you. I'll come on anytime. Yeah, I do a free DFS show every Friday on YouTube at Ship It Nation. You can go over there. We have DFS shows for all sports. It's all free over there on the YouTube channel. But me and my guy Titletown will break down the full card DFS wise. We got 200K up top over there on DraftKings. So I'll be playing it, hoping that I can get lucky on Saturday and hit that 200K. But yeah, just follow me on Twitter at Big Marley 3. I post everything there. But thanks again for having me on. Good luck to you, James. Good luck to everybody listening. Let's crush this card.
All right. Take care, Carl. Thanks, mate.
Thanks a lot, man.
So now for our next guest, I got another OG of the game. His name is Brett Appley, and he's joining me right now. How you doing, Brett?
What's up, man? I'm doing good. It's UFC 300 fight week. We're covering every single fight card every single week. So no matter whether the fights are good or bad, we're here. But UFC 300 is a pretty damn good card, and I couldn't be happier to be breaking down the fights this week and chatting with you as well. So thanks for having me on.
Yeah, appreciate that, man. This week's been like super hectic for me personally. I was telling you off air, I've been doing a stream every single day this week, and people are asking me to be on their podcast. I've asked you to be on my podcast. I think it's the first time I've asked you to be on my podcast. So thanks for coming on. But it just shows you how big UFC 300 is. More content, more shows. I'm sure you've been doing a lot of stuff on your own website, etc., etc. So thanks for having me on. And as you know, this whole show is to give some flowers, to give some respect to the OGs, right? And what I mean by OGs is people who came before me. So I started making content in 2019. that was mainly on Twitter and on YouTube as well. But there was people doing it way before me, and they inspired me to do it. You know, like if there wasn't people making content before me, would I have been the first in the world? Probably not. And there's always new cappers coming every single week, right? But the OGs are always going to be the OGs. No one can come before them because the time's gone. So I just wanted to give a little bit of respect to them, give you specifically your flowers. And my question to you, I'm asking every one of my guests this. My question is, how did you come to be, right? Like, why are you a content creator? How did you become to be an MMA gambler specifically? Just tell us in brief, like your origin story and how you came to be a face online.
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, I've always been a very competitive person, and most of my life pre-mixed martial arts, I was obsessed with soccer. So I was playing competitive soccer throughout my entire childhood, high school, and that was like one of the only things I cared about. I just love sports. I love being competitive. I unfortunately I'm not the biggest or the fastest or the strongest person, and my time came to an end playing, competitive sports at a high level. But by college, I stumbled upon jujitsu through a roommate who's a high school wrestler, and he would just, pick you up and dump you on your head. And I didn't know what mixed martial arts was really at that time. I was only a team sports fan, and eventually I just got into jujitsu. And once I realized that jujitsu, a lot of it is about technique and what you know, and you can learn the game, and that's far more important than being big and fast and strong. As soon as I realized that, I became obsessed with that. And so throughout college, I just trained jujitsu extensively. Eventually that led into watching mixed martial arts. And then separately, I've been gambling on and off my entire life through poker at the early stages, fantasy sports, which is, big here in the States, fantasy football, fantasy baseball, etc. And then I have a degree in journalism. So one of the only parts of school that I was ever good at was writing. And I wanted to tie my life to sports any way that I could. So in college, my plan was to become a sports writer. And that was actually my first job out of college. I was a professional sports writer. I would cover like 15 high schools in the Northern California area, and doing interviews and things like that, writing stories. And all of these sort of things led me to the DraftKings path, which is my specialty. It's not, pure gambling as some might look at it, but fantasy sports, the DraftKings side. DraftKings launched their MMA product at the start of 2015. And that was, still at the somewhat of the early stages of fantasy sports. I was there. I was looking for content, looking for advice, and I realized that there was nobody providing it. If you wanted to, find an article about fantasy football, there's 1,000 people who are writing articles about fantasy football. No one was writing about fantasy mixed martial arts at the time. So I was like, you know what? I can write. I have a background in this. I feel like I understand it to some degree. Let me try and help people. I started blogging for free in 2015. And I've only missed a couple cards since then. So it's really just, I was, have had all these tools from, in background. I was at the right place at the right time. And then, I started blogging and writing about DraftKings content in 2015. And it's just slowly gotten bigger and bigger to the point that I'm able to do this as a full-time profession now.
Nice, bro. Yeah, that's a nice story. I kind of share some of that with you as well. And I think a lot of people do, when you start training jiu-jitsu, as you mentioned, within the first session, you're like, oh shit, there's a lot I didn't know here, And then some people get scared of that and never come back because they're like, I don't want to be humiliated again. And some people get obsessed with it and like, no, I can't let another man do this to me. And I kind of felt like that as well, because I never trained grappling for many years. I only did striking. And then when I did grappling, I'm not going to say I thought it was like nerdy to do grappling, but there's a little bit of a stigma on grapplers. You can have the biggest nerd in the world, but you can be a black belt still. Whereas with strikers, most of the time, it's a little bit more physical. They're a little bit more rough around the edges. Maybe they got black eye. You know how it goes. And so I never really did grappling. And when I did grappling, instantly, I'm like, oh shit, I better start coming here regularly. And then I stopped doing striking for like the next 4 or 5 months and only did grappling. So I kind of share that with you like a lot of people do. You mentioned you was, so I understand how you got into MMA, jiu-jitsu, et cetera, it's through jiu-jitsu. But with the gambling side of it, I know you said that in 2015, that's when DraftKings released the MMA, and you got into DraftKings MMA, I'm assuming, in 2015 once they released it as well. But there was no fantasy MMA before that, right? So was you betting on MMA and gambling on it and then naturally transitioned into the DraftKings? Or did the DraftKings literally introduce you to the world of gambling your money?
Yeah, it was more the DraftKings side of things. I mean, you come from a different part of the world. So gambling in California is still not legal at this time. I can't go on DraftKings or FanDuel and open up a book. And I mean, there are ways to get around it, but I can't just go open up a bunch of books and bet. But I do have access to fantasy sports. And prior to mixed martial arts, I was, playing fantasy sports on DraftKings, just different sports. And there was also this one site called Countermove. I don't know if you've heard of it. I can't remember when they shut down, but they were open prior to DraftKings for maybe a couple years. It was the same sort of contest. But yeah, once I got deep into providing content where, before I was more of a casual MMA fan, I would watch a lot of the fights. I would, pick my winners. But once you're in the position of providing content for people where they're going out there and taking your information and gambling money, you better be well versed. And so at that time, once I'm researching every single fight on every single slate, now suddenly I do also have takes on the betting sides, and they're obviously I have access to offshore books. So my first love, or my first the effort I put in was just to provide the content. Then I sort of picked up the knowledge as I went, improved myself, improved my own content, and then that sort of eventually transitioned into allowing me to have useful betting takes as well. So DraftKings is still my specialty, but I definitely have keep an eye on the betting side as well.
Yeah, that's a natural progression. So, DraftKings is becoming massive. Like fantasy sports in general, I think it's just growing and growing and growing. I'm actually interested in that specifically. Like, would you say, is fantasy sports still growing over in the USA? Like, there's more fantasy apps opening up almost every single month. Am I correct in saying that? Because I can't access it over here, but I hear my American buddies speaking about it a lot.
Well, there's always been fantasy baseball back in like the 70s was a huge thing, but that, it's pre technology a lot of the time. But fantasy football is absolutely massive here, season long fantasy football. And then DraftKings introduced the daily side, and within the daily side, things have slowly grown. So like when I first started, the reason no one was producing any content was because there were 60 players in a contest, and there's just not big prize pools. Eventually, by the time COVID hit, which was an unfortunate worldwide situation, but when COVID hit, it was the only sport around, we had $1 million to first place. So it's absolutely boomed. That the COVID era helped fantasy MMA boom quite specifically. And since then we've had, big prizes throughout. I wouldn't say that we're still growing necessarily, because the games are getting sharper, and that's sort of a questionable angle as far as how the fantasy landscape will shake out long term. But again, like gambling is still illegal in California. It's illegal in Texas, major states. So like the gambling as a whole in the United States, I think, is definitely on an upward trend, and fantasy sports will kind of tie itself into that for the most part.
Yeah, that makes sense, man. So we'll get into some fights now because I'm conscious of time. We don't have too much longer. So UFC 300, there's lots of different fights. I'm just kind of letting my guests pick any fight you want to speak about, because we could go through the whole card. All the card is interesting, to be honest. Like I don't mind speaking about any fight. So if there's anything specifically you want to touch on, let's do it.
Okay, yeah. I mean, of course we'll start with Bo Nickel. No, I'm just kidding. There's a lot of good fights to talk about. Why don't I start with Bobby Green and Jim Miller? That's an interesting one to me, mostly because the way that I view fights is more from a macro stats based point of view than I think the average person. And this one, the stats clearly point to Bobby Green being the rightful favorite. Whereas I would say the more of the X factors, some of the unknowns, the variables could lead you to the Jim Miller path. So it's an interesting fight for me from that perspective. I think that ultimately I lean on the stats, and I look for consistency. I look for volume. I look for round winning potential. I look for the ability to control where the fight takes place. And I just think Bobby Green is the better fighter in that regard. He lands 6.1 significant strikes per minute in a large sample. He absorbs 3.7 per minute, 62% striking defense. Jim Miller, 2.9 significant strikes landed per minute, 3.1 absorbed, 58% striking defense. I think the stats and just watching tape as well, like to me, if this fight plays out for any extended period of time, I think Bobby Green is going to attempt a lot more strikes than Jim Miller, and he projects to land a lot more strikes than Jim Miller. That's just in his base. He's a high volume boxer. His volume ceiling is far more than anything Jim Miller's ever been able to produce. And I have to project Green to win striking exchanges over an extended period of time at a pretty high rate, where on the ground, of course, Jim Miller is an elite submission grappler, but most of his success comes early in fights. Another issue with him, though, is his kind of round winning ability on the ground. He defends takedowns at 48%. I know Bobby Green is not the best wrestler in the world. 1.2 takedowns landed per 15 minutes, though, for Bobby Green. Jim Miller only averages 1.5 takedowns per 15 minutes. I think Bobby Green has more round winning potential on the feet, and I think Bobby Green has more round winning potential on the ground, where I see it as Jim Miller having the theoretical early submission upside, some early knockout upside. Bobby Green's coming off a brutal knockout loss. And I mean, that's kind of one of the X factors that I alluded to. Yeah. It's hard to quantify that. And I mean, the reality is, like, that may impact him in this fight. And I understand why people may be excited about Jim Miller because of that. Jim Miller is, it's UFC 300. He's going to go out there and swing and try and put Bobby Green away. He's very tough. He's durable, and he's looked good recently. So I am scared about Green in that regard. I kind of like Green by decision, though, because Jim Miller is very, very difficult to finish. And instead of buying Green at like minus 170, minus 180, or he's even up to minus 190 in spots, I see him by decision plus 140, plus 150 on a bunch of different books. That feels like the most likely outcome of the fight to me. I don't think Green's submitting Jim Miller at a high rate. I don't think Green's knocking Jim Miller out at a high rate. But the numbers point to Bobby Green winning this fight, more often than not. And I think far more often than not, it comes by decision. So that's one spot I'm interested in, especially at plus money.
Yeah. I'm more on the other side. And obviously that is based on some intangibles quite heavily. Yeah. And it's interesting, because I don't know if you've seen my content, but, I often say that there's 3 ways to cap a fight. So we've got stylistics, which is mainly what you see when you watch tape, as a wrestler against a striker, et cetera, et cetera. That goes into, we can go into heavy detail with that, of course. Then you got statistics, which are, that's what you do. That's what your forte is. Yeah. And then we got the intangibles. And oftentimes people will concentrate on the stylistics, or oftentimes people will concentrate on one over the other, or like 2 over the third one and ignore. And I just feel like if you look at all 3, it's the best way to cap a fight. Sometimes it's hard because then you've got 3 different aspects of the fight and you're trying to all cap it in and make a one prediction. It's not easy, right? So it can actually be better often just to focus on one, as long as the other 2 aren't blowing it out of the water. But for this fight, I do think the intangibles are quite important. Obviously he's coming off a bad knockout 4 months ago. And prior to that, Bobby was known to have a very good chin. He hadn't been knocked out in a lot of times, hadn't really been hurt that much in a long time. But then he gets knocked out by Drew Dober quite badly. That was quite a bad knockout as well. Then he comes back against Jared Gordon. I don't think he looked good in that fight. I know it was only 2 or 3 minutes gone. It was very early in the fight. It was stopped by an illegal headbutt. I actually bet on Bobby Green KO round 1 at something crazy like plus 800. And then he KOs him in round 1. And then it's no contest after the fight, which is kind of annoying. But I got my karma back, I think, because I bet on Chris Weidman the other day. And obviously the same thing happened with the eye poke, but they actually awarded him the win. But I don't think he looked good in that fight against Jared Gordon. He was getting tagged up, and I didn't expect him to be tagged up on the feet. by Jared Gordon. And then obviously he has the Jalen Turner fight where he gets knocked out brutally a couple of times, it seemed like. And he was very, very concussed after that fight. You saw it immediately in the octagon. He was concussed, didn't know what happened. So there's 3 fights in a row now, and there might have been one other I'm forgetting in between there, but there's 3 fights in a row that I don't think he's looked the best, and he's also coming off 2 bad knockouts in those fights. So I do think we have to weigh that quite heavily. And Brett, the biggest intangible in this fight, which everyone's ignoring, which this is literally going to determine the fight. We got Jim Miller fighting at UFC 100, and he wins. He fought at UFC 200, and he wins. And now he's fighting at UFC 300. So I think it's written in the stars for Jim Miller to get the win. And obviously we don't cap fights like that. But I do cap the mindset and motivation in fights, which is another intangible that people ignore. And I think that he is going to have massive motivation to win at UFC 300. And how can we quantify that? Like, do we add an extra 3% implied in probability? Like, I understand it's very hard, but it's not a negative. For me, that's a positive. Fighting at UFC 300, I do think he's going to have that extra motivation in training camp. Maybe he sticks to his diet a little bit better. Maybe he goes that extra mile in training. So these are little things I do like to cap in, especially when I'm paying a plus money underdog.
Yeah, and I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I would say for me, the motivation wouldn't be an issue. I'm sure Bobby Green is motivated, but what Bobby Green may not do is fight intelligently. You know, of the two, I trust Jim Miller to go out there and execute a game plan. He's going to fight, he's going to fight as hard as he can. Yeah. Bobby Green might fuck around. It's now there's $300,000 bonuses on the line. He might try and do some weird stuff. Like that's another intangible that I was referring to, where I kind of know, I know what I expect from Jim Miller. And of course he's motivated, and of course he's going to try hard. For me, it's more just that over a large sample, or I mean, even in a recent sample, I can't remember the last time he's won a decision. He doesn't land a high volume of strikes. And so he might go out there and he might knock Bobby Green out. He might land a takedown early, jump on a choke or something like that. But the longer the fight plays out, and if the fight's playing out over an extended period, therefore Bobby Green has survived exchanges. He hasn't been knocked down. And because of that, in that style of fight, I think he will excel. And that's also why I'm more inclined to lean to a decision prop rather than bet a money line straight. But, you mentioned analyzing kind of 3 different points of view. And I think that's important. And I try very hard to not just hone in on one single side. Like I think it's very important to, at the very least, identify the paths to victory for both sides, make a strong case for both sides. If you can't make a strong case for both sides, you probably don't fully understand the dynamics of the fight. I still favor Bobby Green here, and I like the decision prop, but I can totally understand why you might make that argument for Jim Miller, and we'll see how it plays out on Saturday.
Yeah, man, it's going to be a good fight. I'm rooting for Jim Miller, regardless of if I'm picking him to win the fight, because that would be a crazy story, if he won at 300, 100, and 200. And, funnily enough, and, you're a stats guy, you might be interested in this. He was a favorite at 100 and a favorite at 200, but now he's an underdog at 300. So the only time he hasn't been a favorite, can he deny the odds? Because the other time he didn't deny the odds, he just done what he was supposed to do. Mm-hmm. And also he won via decision and via knockout. So if he gets a submission here, it's going to be the 3P. But that's all narrative-based stuff, We haven't got too much time, Brett, so I'm going to call it a day now. I really appreciate you being on, bro. Like I said, want to give you your flowers, your respect for being an OG of the game. If it wasn't for people like you, I probably wouldn't be here myself. So, that's what the whole show is about. Shout out to you. I want to mention Daily Fan MMA because that's your website. Can you just touch on exactly, what it is, what you guys do for anyone who might not know? I know what it is, but some people might not. So let us know.
Yeah, for sure. Daily Fan MMA is the brand I created a while ago. I hosted my content on there for several years, and we still have multiple, betting packages up on that site. We have NASCAR F1 content up on that site. I also recently joined forces with Establish the Run, which is where my new home of my premium content will be, and it's DraftKings focused. So we still do the same stuff. We have breakdowns on every single fight, podcast projections, etc. But it's DraftKings based, and DraftKings, you're playing against other people. So there's $200,000 to first place this weekend. the book's not going to win it. Someone's going to win it. Someone out there playing, and we tend to provide good tools to help you make money there and give you the best chance to compete against the field. So if anyone wants more DraftKings based content, feel free to check my content out at Establish the Run.
Awesome, man. All right. Thanks a lot for coming on again, bro. Hopefully we can cash some money this weekend, whether it be on fantasy sports or actual, bookmaker tickets, whatever it may be. I know it's going to be a good card overall, man. So good luck on your own bets, on your own fantasy sports, and hopefully we can do another podcast soon.
Yep. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks, bro. Now, on this part of the show, I've got two OGs, and you can see they're standing right next to me right now out there in Vegas. Two OGs of the game, Cody Saftic and Paul Shaughnessy. How you doing, boys?
Yeah, fuck yeah, man. We're happy to be down here, UFC 300. Been meaning to link up with you for a while. Know we've been talking back and forth over the days, so as soon as the opportunity presents itself, we're on the strip. We're partying a little hard maybe, but I wasn't going to pass it up. So Paul was like, can I come on? Like, of course you can come on, Paul. So yeah, Paul's here too, again, just having a blast, bro.
Yeah, we're hanging outside of New York right now. About to meet up with some other, like, MMA content people.
I wish I was there,
we show up here. Credit to like Circa Sportsbook. They've showed us like the red carpets. Like we basically just show up to like the shows that we were gonna do anyway from anywhere on earth, and they've taken care of us. It's been great.
Yeah, did you have a live show out in Vegas?
Yeah, dude. So again, like you're saying, like how'd we get into it? And we'll definitely get into that. But like, if you would have asked me 10 years ago if this is where we were going to be in Vegas doing live shows and having Circa pay for it, like no fucking chance, man. It just started out as a labor of love. We do it because we're fight fans. That's why we all do it. We have a passion for martial arts. And then so for the following to get built and for people to jump on board and get behind us and have the support, and then to have like a major Vegas sports book and hotel put up 4 of us for a week, man. I'm heading out Sunday. They're going to stay till Monday, but like, I got a kid, man. I got to be getting home. I'm going to get Cats in the Cradle. You guys got that song out there? Cats in the Cradle in the silver spoon. Man, the guy doesn't have time for his kid, and then his kid don't got time for him. But as far as it is, bro, 4 days here, it's been a blast. Live show's been good. Pat Mayo's doing his golf shit. Couldn't be happier, man.
Sorry for the interruption in the audio there. There was a fucking roller coaster literally rolling over top of our head.
Is this Las Vegas? Is this the Las Vegas Strip? Yeah, the well-known strip. I've never been
now. Yeah, we're staying over at Circa, which is in like Old Vegas, which is like the old strip, whatever you want to call it.
Yeah, so Fremont straight up crackhead, right? And it's always been like crackhead part of Vegas. They got the main strip. We got Fremont, which is rough. So this is a dope ass hotel just off of Fremont. So we just hung out there last night. They got like performers. Maybe like guy doing a magic trick, 2 strippers trying to get you to come to some like after hours party, and a homeless guy, and they're right next to each other, all selling their bit, man. So every walk of life is welcome in Las Vegas.
Did you go to the party, the after hours crackhead party, or not?
It's Wednesday. Well, yesterday was Wednesday. Today's Thursday, so we're trying to like reel back to not get into the real dirty. There's still PFL to attend tomorrow, UFC 300 on Saturday. And then, we'll see where the debauchery takes us after that.
So you're there for UFC 300, I assume. You go into the fights?
Yeah, for sure. You're not going to come down here and not go to the fights, right? So the bottom line is it's like they're gouging you for the ticket price. I get that, but there's not a bad fight on the card. There's not a bad fighter outside of Cody Brunridge, who sucks. Outside of him, there's just not a bad fight. We were talking earlier, Cody Garbrandt's opening with Figgy. It's 2 former world champions, both currently winning fights on winning streaks. This could co-headline any pay-per-view. It could headline any fight night, and it's the fucking first fight on the card of a 13-fight card. So you're gonna come down.
It was kind of awkward. We like finished Dogger Pass, and we got to the end. She's like, "Oh, and by the way, there's Cody Garbrandt versus Davison Figueiredo. Both former champs, both incredibly talented. Like, I know it doesn't have the marquee fight at the top of the bill this week, but like,
that's the only thing.
It's a stacked card, top to bottom."
They knew they didn't have the marquee fight, so they just made every single fight an absolute banger, and it makes up for it, in my opinion. I'm still excited 100%. For the Hill fight.
It's a good idea and it's a bad idea, because if you look at every card after this card, they suck. Like, the headliner's just not there. They used up 8 weeks worth of headlining event fights to put on one show. But that's credit to they want to put on a big spectacle for the fans. And the fact that they're giving these guys a $300,000 bonus now, they're going to be fighting for it. So the UFC, for as much as people give them shit and they're tight and this and that, like, if you're a fighter, that's where you want to be.
So, this whole show, right, is about giving love to the OGs, giving respect to the OGs. I'm saying it to you because I'm live with you now. So forgive me, viewers. I've been saying this to every single person, but just bear with me. That's what the whole show is about, right? I make content on YouTube. And the reason I make content is because other people made content before me. If they didn't do it, I wouldn't be here. So first of all, big shout out to both of you, because I know you both been in the game for a long time. And we're on UFC 300 this week, right? You've been in the game for longer than me, way longer than me. You've been watching MMA for longer than me, etc., etc. Is this the best card you've ever seen on paper, or has there been a better one?
If you're a hardcore fight fan, this is the best card that you've seen on paper, because of course you've got just so many good fights. But if you were to just run into a casual guy in the strip and be like, this is who's on, Alex Pereira versus Jamal Hill, you don't know who the fuck that is. Whereas UFC 100, you got Brock Lesnar, you got George St. Pierre, you guys got guys that were iconic. And it didn't matter that George's fight was not very good and Brock Ash's Frank Mir. You just had so much star power, I think. The UFC wanted to do that for this card. They wanted to get Conor McGregor. It just didn't work out. They flirted with the idea of Ronda Rousey. It just didn't work out. And then the UFC's in a strange point right now that outside of McGregor, Rousey, and John Jones, all three, Rousey's been retired for years. McGregor fights once every few years, and Jones might squeeze one in a year. They have no legitimate stars. They have no Michael Jordans. They have no Kobe Bryants. They have no guys that just the casual person knows. So this card is loaded to the titties. But the bottom line is there's not that real dangling carrot at the top of it. So I wouldn't say it's the greatest card in UFC history. But again, the greatest card of UFC history, you'll only be able to know that in the recap show, right? You've got to watch the bangers that unfold, and then you'll know this was the best fucking card ever. So it looks on paper like it's as good as an offering as they put out. But I get the feeling that they really wanted to put one bigger marquee attraction. Things just didn't play out that way.
Do you know what they wanted for this card? Was it just McGregor and Jones, I assume?
They wanted McGregor. They want McGregor, but McGregor's doing like movies and doing like real sketchy interviews with Jake Gyllenhaal, probably high on cocaine. Like, it is what it is. That's the Conor McGregor effect, I suppose. But
yeah, I mean, he's your biggest star. Everybody knows him. It resonates. And if you're looking at strict pay-per-view buys, UFC 300 on its own, because it's a big event, it'll drop buys. But McGregor, his selling power, what he brings to the table, that's obviously what they wanted to put on it. And it just didn't work out that way. So that's kind of half of the reason why I'm not fully sure Jamal Hill's in great shape, is I think they pulled him 6 weeks out of the fight saying, we need to add something here. And he's not necessarily 100%. They offered him a ton of money. They made it worth his while. But I don't know that he's at 100%.
Yeah, coming back off that injury as well. So are you going with Pereira based on that?
Yeah, we talked about today. Like, if it's it's going to be power versus volume. Hill's got power, or the volume all day. He can eclipse 100, 200 significant strikes. Pereira's got that big power. If Hill is 85%, 90%, 100%, I think he beats Pereira, especially being the natural 205er. But I get the impression that he's not 100%. He's been on the shelf for 15 plus months. He has an Achilles injury. And it wasn't he's chomping at the bit to jump back in there. It's the UFC drew him back into it. So, again, when I say it's okay to pass on a fight or put it lower down on my list of priorities and my parlays, this is a 50-50 fight, could go either way. It's hard to have a hard stance. It's hard to be like Clint and say, biggest bet of all time on one guy. It's like a 50-50 fight. But, yeah, if you're a Hill backer, I see his path to victory, 100% do. But I ended up edging Pereira ever so slightly. Where they're at right now physically, I think he got it.
Fair enough. I like Hill this week. I think he's going to land those straight shots. I think he's a bit better at boxing. And I think he'll be able to force those exchanges in the octagon. But we'll see. Paul, who you on? You on Cody's side or my side?
I'm with Cody. It comes down to the question marks that I have around Jamal Hill, but like I don't actually have any money on the main event in particular, but ever so slightly leaning towards, the minus 130 favorite in Alex Pereira.
Boys, like we can talk about these UFC 300 fights, but I've got you two on the strip, two OGs of the game. I don't want to speak about the boring fights, man. Like everyone's going to be speaking about that all week. You two are in Vegas right now. You've had a couple beers. You're having a good night. I'm sure you've had some good nights over the past. Like, have you guys just been going Vegas? Because I know you two do the podcast, but you're actually friends in real life, right? Which is cool to see. Like, have you gone to watch fights together for the last 10 or so years? I don't know the story between you two.
Cody
in
is like
that
a
regard.
matchmaker, and I've been to like low level, like greasy cards, greasy Canadian cards, and like a small, like recreational hockey arena. That he's like, yeah, we're boys. I've been around, watched and like you see some like fun stuff like coming up through the ranks, like watching that type of stuff. But it's like you see a lot of absolute shit that like if it was on a Fight Pass stream, people were like, what am I even doing here? Why am I watching this?
Yeah, straight up. I went to college for like radio and television broadcasting because I seen on like the board of directors, this guy, Anthony Ciccione, was the general manager of Fight Network. So right away, I'm like, I want to go and work for Fight Network. So that's why I signed up for the school. I don't know why Paul signed up for the school, but he went to the exact same program. So we're in a program where it's all football fans, soccer fans, baseball fans. These guys know everything about those sports, and nobody knows anything about MMA. And my guy Paul, MMA fan, I'm an MMA fan. We click. Now at this point in my life, I would say I'm pretty broke as shit. So we would like work these like free intern hours. Paul would buy me a sub from this like coffee time, $2.50 for a 12-inch sub. So garbage. The lunch meat on it was just garbage. He'd buy me a sub. We'd go down to his buddy's place.
It wasn't me.
He had an apartment. We were talking about this earlier. He had a buddy that would go out of town for business, so he'd have his apartment. He'd let me crash on the couch, buy me a sandwich. The guy's my fucking boy. So then we graduate college. We both go to Fight Network. And then we decided, I was like, let's do a show. He wanted to do an MMA variety show like news. I'm like, fuck news. Let's talk picks. We're betting these fights anyways. Let's do picks. Nobody else is doing it. You want to talk about shout outs to the OGs? Luca Fury, only guy that was doing that shit when we started, right? And he was on Sherdog Radio, and he wasn't doing full fight predictions. Now, you can go on YouTube and you can find some dude preview a couple Strikeforce fights or a couple UFC fights, but nobody's doing full fight predictions on every fight, talking about the lines. No one was doing it. So we had the jump on that. We had the backing from Fight Network. We did that for 5-6 years. Total bunch of layoffs. They lay off like 85% of the company.
I got fired.
Staffman saving grace, I stayed home. But Paul got fucking chopped, right? So Paul gets chopped. I'm like, what do I do? They threatened to like not sue us, but they were like, don't use Bookie Beatdown anymore. You can't use Bookie Beatdown. So
we changed the name to Dogger Pass.
Yeah, and then Pat Mayo was like,
we ran a contest actually, and then the best. We basically were just like, we'll mention you on the show if you come up with the best name for our podcast.
Easy.
And it was Bob Voss.
Bob Voss.
I forget what he called his Twitter account, but he came up with it. He's not very active in the MMA gambling streets anymore, but great guy.
So bottom line is Paul gets axed. He ends up moving with Pat Mayo to Nova Scotia. So now we live like a 24-hour drive apart. We're like way apart. But it's just like, this is my brother. This is a guy that I've done this shit forever. People always like, do your own show, hop on with somebody else. But it's like, I'd rather do no motherfucking show than not have my guy Paul, right? So
it would be weird.
How sweet.
Nah, loyalty means more to me than like fame and fortune and that shit, because I gotta sleep on my pillow at the end of the night and feel good about myself. And trust me, brother, I feel really good about myself. So things have just like played out, and I can't say I'm the biggest go-getter, but I've always been like very in tune with. There's a helicopter overhead.
Fucking helicopters, there's fucking roller coasters. It's just fucking scene out here, guys.
Some people go out and they make their own opportunities. That's what you're doing. And that's why I got so much respect for you. And I appreciate that you show that love and respect back, because you got to give respect to get respect. Trust me when I say this. I got a lot of respect for you. You're a go-getter. You go out, you create your own opportunities. You got mad hustle. You do all that shit. For me, that's not my life. My life has always been shit will fall on my lap, and I got to be smart enough to capitalize when it does. So, like, I never went out and got sponsors. Sponsors had contacted me, and I'm not saying it's because I do anything different than anybody. It's just that's the way the universe works, man. Just try to be a good person, and hopefully good things will come around back to you. So, you know how it is. Yeah. You hit a bunch of money. You go on some bad runs. People like to talk shit, but that's how they live their shitty fucking life, right? Miserable as fuck. Whereas you know this game, and the losses come with the wins. You just got to be smart. Bankroll management, key, and obviously being able to stick in the game and being good at it. That doesn't hurt as well. So, those three things will give you some longevity. And if I've got anything else, I won't give myself credit on anything else other than we have longevity. We've been doing this shit for a long time.
Yeah. And that's, it's super hard. That's why I wanted to make the show. It's so hard to even gamble for 3-4 years because of the downtrends, the uptrends. if you're making content on top of that consistently for that long, like definitely deserve some respect. I make content and fuck, sometimes it's a grind. Sometimes I can't be bothered to do it, man. So you guys have been doing it week in, week out for a long time. And it's crazy because I've been listening to you for quite a while, you know, on the podcast, and I've never heard the origin story of how you met Paul. I mean, maybe you've said it before. I'm sure you must have, right? But I just haven't heard it before. So hopefully some of the new viewers who I know will know you guys as well got a lot from that, because that was a cool story you're telling me. And it's kind of beautiful how you was broke, Paul was buying you Subways or saying he wasn't or whatever. And
Coffee time.
So much lower. Like that's like, it was like horse meat.
Subway is 5-star dining compared to coffee time subs at 12 o'clock at night.
Like you had to buy that sub and then like fend off like crackheads who were trying to steal it.
And now look at you, you're fending off crackheads, but in a beautiful place, Vegas, or I don't know if it's beautiful, but on the movies,
fending off crackheads. We're just in like a nicer place, I suppose.
That's exactly it. Yeah.
But that's epic, man. So yeah, like I said, you've been together for a long, long time. And now you're getting paid to do it, man. So shout out to you. I think we'll touch on some fights just before I get you out of it. Then I'll let you go back to all of the craziness that I'm sure you're going to get up to tonight. Is it late where you are? It's probably pretty late now, no?
Not in Vegas time, but because I'm Eastern time myself, everything's 3 hours in the past here. So if it's
quarter to 9.
It's quarter to 9 here. Back home it would be quarter to 11, 10,
early days.
12.
What's the plans for tonight? I mean, anything you can say on the internet anyway.
We're meeting up with some like MMA media people right now.
Yeah, Aaron Bronstetter and a couple of the boys are inside.
Oh,
Mark Coleman's at New York. So shout out to the Hammer. Boom, boom, one of the best of all times. But yeah, we're just going to basically try to keep it like, not PG, but keep it, you're with a bunch of journalists. There's a whole bunch of cameras around.
Yeah.
Now I'll tell you something.
They talk.
It's 3 o'clock in the morning and I'm on Fremont Street and I make a bad decision. I'm not going to rule it out. If I make a bad decision on Fremont Street at 3 a.m., only person I trust to not film that shit and to have my back, my boy Paul Shaughnessy. So yeah, man. We're good in that regard.
All right. So before I get you out of it, I want to do this forever, but I'm conscious of your time. Obviously, you're having a good time in Vegas. I appreciate you taking it randomly on the side of the strip. It's kind of epic. It's going to give the podcast a lot of whatever you call it, color, a lot of
color, personality.
There we go. Yeah. So thanks for that. But what we will do is touch on a couple of fights. Is there any fight that you like feel super strongly about? Have you got any Clint Max bets or like anything, any hot takes that you want to talk about?
Cody Garbrandt's going for a canvas snap. Davison Figueiredo is knocking him out. Bad chin. Sure. Cody Garbrandt is returning to us. Like plus 140. Davison by knockout. Plus 450. Davison knockout round 1. I know you like round 2. I never really bet the round 2. I either bet like 1 or 3. It's probably like a flaw in my game. But it's just like, we've been backing Cody Garbrandt on these last 2 fights against really low level competition. Now he's stepping right back in there against a former champion who I know he fought at 125, but he was always really big for that division. And he was known as being the heaviest puncher at 125. So I think Cody Garbrandt is cooked.
I'm going to go with Bobby Green. Like, Bobby Green's coming over a terrible knockout loss. I think everyone's going to be talking about that. But for the record, I don't know if anybody's realized this. Jim Miller ain't the kind of dog that he just fought, right? Like, he's way slower than the tarantula. He's way shorter than the tarantula. He doesn't have that big power. I think Bobby Green just minds his P's and Q's like he always does. We were also talking about the over-under. Bobby's a career decision guy. If you look at nearly all of his fights, he's a decision guy. His only 2 TKO wins in UFC, and he's been with the organization for 10 years, is a bunch of kicks to the balls against James Krause. In hindsight, James Krause probably took a dive in that fight. And then he knocks out Grant Dawson in 33 seconds. But Jim's durable enough, tough enough, that I think Bobby just does what he does, shoulder roll, weighs his head, keeps jabbing. And the bottom line is, coming off a bad loss to Jalen Turner, not the end of the world. Jim Miller doesn't present any of those problems. He could wrestle back in the day, doesn't choose to do it anymore. His BJJ black belt, opportunistic, that he needs to get the fight to the ground either by knocking his opponent down or then just having no wrestling. So Bobby Green, stout takedown defense. It's always checked out. He's got more volume. He's a slick counter-punching boxer. I just need the judges to get it right. This is one of those fights that's, like I said, probably going to decision, probably relatively competitive. Everybody in the arena will think Bobby Green won, but it doesn't matter. It matters what the 3 judges think, or 2 of the 3 judges. So I got Bobby Green. I got overs on that fight. I'll admit the UFC card, because it's so loaded with talent, and outside of Bunridge, you could take an under 1.5 and Bo Nickel inside the distance, but there's nothing to be made there. Everybody else is so talented. They have so much back class. They have so much skill. They're former world champions, world title challengers. It's hard to write off anybody and saying they can't win. These guys are all capable of winning. Another guy I don't particularly care for this week is Charles Oliveira. But when you look at his resume, takes a beating against Michael Chandler, comes back and knocks him out. Taking a beating against Justin Gaethje, comes back, takes him out. Taking a beating against Dustin Poirier, comes back and takes him out. That resume, he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. The guy's one of the best of all time. So we can write him off that he's not going to take Sarukian down. But again, he can just find the chin. Joaquim Silva can rock Sarukian. You don't think that Charles Oliveira can rock him? And if he does rock him, you don't think he could work his way to the back? So it's super talented. I'll tweet some shit out tomorrow, but I think the better value in terms of if you're just trying to make some money this weekend is the PFL. I think the PFL's got better. You can make quicker couple plays that are maybe going to fly under the radar as compared to this UFC card, which has got me thinking, there's going to be some decent amount of upsets. Officially on the show today, I picked 4 underdogs, but it's not like any of them are more than plus 145. They're not giant underdogs.
I've got one bigger than plus 145 on PFL. You can tell me if I'm crazy. Main event, Impa Kasanganay taking on Alex Polizzi. So I bet on Impa against Johnny Eblen at plus 400, Cody and Paul, and it was that close to cashing. He gave Eblen a run for his money, could have potentially got a knockout, and then obviously lost via split decision. He got paced by the wrestler. And I'm going back the opposite way now. Now they're giving me the Impa's opponent at plus 400. So I'm just taking that side. It's about numbers at the end of the day. And I bet Impa at plus 400. Now I'm fading Impa at minus 400. So you might think I'm crazy, but I feel like Alex may be able to pace this guy. He's obviously the worst striker. With the wrestling, he's a good wrestler, but Impa's got good takedown defense. He's a strong guy, but Impa's fought 17 times in the last 12 months or something like that. Sorry, 7 times in the last 12 months, something like that. It's a high level of experience he's had. And I just feel like at plus 400, there might be some value on there. So I don't know how you feel about that one, but I'd be interested to hear it.
Yeah, listen, everyone's got a shot, but in my opinion, like Alex Polizzi, a guy that wrestled at Northwestern, has that grind. He doesn't really have like stock 15-minute cardio to push an excellent pace, and he doesn't have any striking to fall back on. So a lot of the times he'll make his fights very gritty, very close, very grinding affairs, and that's a good strategy for Impa. But Impa, even though he's a natural 170, who moves up to 185, who's now campaigning even higher, his takedown defense has proven to be pretty good, and his striking just leaps and bounds better than Alex Polizzi. I'll admit, I didn't think he had a shot in hell against Johnny Eblen, who I rate very, very highly. In a 5-round fight, Eblen would have ate him up. In the 3-round fight, he gave a very good account of himself. If Alex Polizzi was to fight Johnny Eblen, he would get fucking turned into a pretzel. It would be a non-competitive affair. So I got to rate that Impa, was able to hang.
The voice cut off, Cody. You went mute. You muted. Now I can hear you now. Yeah, you muted for a sec. I can hear you.
Yeah, Pat was calling. I guess it muted this stream because he was calling. But yeah. Again, Polizzi's like a grinding type guy that will probably try to make some of these rounds close. But judges are looking for damage. They want the guy that's landing the bigger shots, and he doesn't tend to land a whole lot of damage as much as he can just keep it close and grind on you and secure a couple takedowns. So listen, I mean, it's a live bet for sure. But if anything, if I thought Polizzi was going to win, then I would take the fight to go the distance because Polizzi's not finishing Impa Kasanganay. But you might be able to get a decent price on that.
And Polizzi's tough as fuck.
If you want one half greasy, I'll give you a half greasy one. Sadibu C over Silveira. Silveira's not good. He's not good. Yeah, he wrestled at Arizona State University, but he fails to complete his takedowns. He's super lumbering. He has very low volume, and he just reaches too far out, generally follows his opponents. Sadibu C is moving up a weight class. Fair. He's out of Extreme Couture, trains with Sean Strickland, trains with all the boys down there. He's way more agile. He's way quicker. And for a guy that used to have zero takedown defense, he's been stuffing the vast majority of them. Doesn't have to cut weight. He's going to be even faster. And if you can just get Silveira to follow him, he's going to land the better shots. He's currently like even money slide underdog. Tons of value in Sadibu C.
It's funny, like, I think we might be going against each other this week, Cody, because like a lot of this, you mentioned Bobby Green. I kind of like Miller. You mentioned C. I kind of like Silveira. I might pull the trigger on Silveira. Don't you think that if Silveira gets his back once, he could just fuck him up?
Yeah, but how is he going to get his back? When you look
Yeah,
at the
it might
level of
not.
competition, yeah, if you look at the guys that he wins at, especially, he's not, he's fought a couple decent guys, but when he fights somebody with a modicum of talent, maybe somebody that might be rated somewhere, he just largely struggles. If he could get to
Yeah.
the back, he'd have to shoot the takedown, hold him up against the cage, do a duck under, and slowly slink his way to the back. But then does he have the ability to just rear naked choke him in a minute and a half, or will the round end? A lot of the times now, they're not looking for control. They're looking for damage. They're looking for volume. They're looking for who's landing those shots. And with UFC, you're getting a guy that won $1 million in the PFL tournament. He's not just some bum middleweight jumping up. He's a guy that's given a great account of himself. He comes from a Muay Thai base, so he was super slow to the learning curve of MMA. But now he's putting all the pieces together. Silveira, meanwhile, his dad is a Hall of Famer, Conan Silveira. The kid grows up in American Top Team. He wrestles in college at ASU, and yet he's never put his game together. He's very much a Ryan Couture, the son of Randy Couture. It doesn't matter that the old man's a badass. It just never really passed on to the son. So I liked him originally. He was the LFA champ, and then he comes to PFL, and I'm banking on him. But they're always greasy. Sometimes he fights guys that are just random guys plucked from a random regional scene, and he doesn't necessarily thrive over that level of competition. So it's not that I think, it's a runaway fight for Saudi Boussi. It's just if you're going to give me even money, I got one guy that's a lot more proven versus another guy that, what if he gets the back? Yeah, but what beyond that? Is he going to ground and pound him? Is he going to choke him out? Is he going to transition? Is he going to get to the back again in round 2? Or is it just you're hoping for one singular move? Because if that one singular move doesn't pan out, you're going to be eating jabs and fucking range kicks from Saudi Boussi all night. So again, it's a 50-50 fight, and it's hard to have a whole lot of confidence one side or the other because you can see both guys winning. But got to make picks, got to make plays, and we're going to the PFL show, so it's like gotta have my money on Saudi Boussi because I'll be the loudest motherfucker in that building.
What you guys miss out of that entire situation is there was multiple couples walking by at the time, and Cody screaming at the wall about Sadabusi versus Josh Silver. Nobody except for us has even the foggiest idea of what's going on here. He just looks like a crazy person that should be on Fremont Street, down here on the classy strip, just yelling at literally a concrete brick wall. God
Cody's
bless
got the
Saftic.
Bro, you got the best stories. You tell stories so well, man. You get so animated. You explain them well. You got the history, bro. Your T-shirt right now is funny because I was going to ask you about that. Mixed Martial Madness. You only done 2 episodes or something, and then you retired, bro. What's going on? The people are waiting.
So I did 3 episodes for the record,
Okay.
but all the same, dude. It was like a passion thing. It's I love all these old school stories. I like to tell stories. This is going to be sweet. So you do it. You put in a ton of effort. I do all the editing myself. I write the script myself. I do all the research myself. You put a ton of effort into it. And even though I think it's dope, and even though a lot of people have said how much they liked it, it's what are you realistically getting on this? 2,000-3,000 views on YouTube. I think one of them, my best one's got 12,000 views on YouTube. Whereas Paul and I talk for an hour and a half once a week, and it gets the same numbers, right? And that takes 0 effort. Well, it takes my research, sure, but I'm not editing all night. I'm not voicing the stuff all night. I'm not having to nitpick all these different things. So it'd be different if Hulu or some shit was hey, we got Dark Side of the Ring. We want to do a Dark Side of the Cage. And then they would contract me to write 10 episodes, and they got an editing team, and you do it like that. Then yeah, it's dope. But again, I'm at a point in my life where it's there has to be some type of return on my time. Because I got 2 kids, and I got a house, and I got a million things that go on outside of just MMA shit. And of course, with MMA, it's not just UFC. There's PFL, and there's Bellator, and there's Dana White's Contender Series. And I work for Fight Network, so I got to cover KSW stuff. And I literally we're in Vegas now having a great time, but I was just in Knoxville, Tennessee last week calling Luis Pena, Violent Bob Ross, called his fight for Aries Fight Series 25. So you want to put yourself out there and you want to do all this shit. And it's cool that people appreciate it. But at the end of the day, it's not pay me for it. But there has to be some type of compensation, or it's the kind of thing I put to the back burner. But I got a really dope-ass Phil Baroni episode written, done, ready to go. And I got a really dope Junie Browning episode ready, good to go. And they're both real good. It's just I need to find the time and the motivation to just be you're already grinding for 10 hours a day, grind for 14. It's doable, but,
I feel you, man. At the end of the day, man, time is money. It's very important. What I will say, though, is the views, I'm almost certain, and I ain't just saying this as a fan of you, you objectively, you're good at telling stories and you know a lot of shit, right? And so I think after some time, the views will go up heavily. The MMA views on YouTube are massive, man. Some of these people are doing 200K For like a Conor McGregor documentary, sometimes they do a couple of million. So obviously you're going into the weeds about people that are kind of unknown. So it's not going to get the same amount of views. But you're only 3 episodes in. You and Paul get the same amount of views because you've been doing it for 10 years, 5 years, like you explained earlier on this show. If you did the Mixed Martial Madness for a year, guarantee you would start getting paid from that. But obviously, it's that starting point. You got to grind through, and you're a busy man. You got a wife, kids, etc., etc. So I understand, but I couldn't let you on the podcast without saying the people are waiting for more episodes. So I'm glad you've got 2 coming, and hopefully you can do more in the future. Cody and Paul, if you're still there, if he's not fighting off crackheads, there you are. I just want to say I appreciate you coming on again, boys. I'll let you go now. Go into the Las Vegas desert and, do whatever you're going to do. But I appreciate you coming on. 2 OGs of the game. A lot of respect for you guys, and good luck this weekend. Hopefully we can do it again. I'll shoot it back to you before I click off, just in case there's anything you want to say to the people, to the viewers, and then we'll cut it off.
Hell yeah, man. Honestly, I'm just glad that this next generation of guys have started up, because I always said when I started, like, I don't know anybody else that does the shit that I do. And then over time, it's like there's people that are legitimately popping up who are legitimately good. Now, I'm not going to name names because I've got some really good friends in this industry who are not good. They love to do shows. They love to do content. They love to do stuff. But the bottom line is, it's maybe more so for entertainment, or maybe more so they don't have time to tape study, so they kind of mail it in some weeks. Or a lot of guys Tapology or WikiCap, and you can see when they talk, you can hear when they talk, that it's just they're going off misinformation, or they don't have the whole story. They'll say, oh, this guy got knocked out in his last fight, but the guy rolled his ankle and it's a TKO due to ankle. Saying he got knocked out.
Lots of that.
So when I see guys like you, and I see people will give you flack, and oh man, he fucking had a couple bad weeks. I've been there, brother, right? And I can relate to that. But I really respect your knowledge. I respect what you bring to the table. And again, the next generation was meant to come and be better than me and grind harder than me. And I need those top first round draft picks to prop up. So you're killing it, dude. You're definitely heading in the right direction. And again, I even though you've got a million things going on this week, I'd most definitely make time for you, and we'll definitely do it again as well.
Yeah, I really appreciate that. Paul, again, respects to you, brother. That was to both of you. Anything you want to say before we kick off?
Figgy, knockout. It's happening.
Done.
Guaranteed.
You heard it here first, or maybe second after the doggo pass. Thanks a lot, boys, man. Have good fun tonight.
Cheers, buddy.
Appreciate you both. All right, fellas, we've come to the end of the podcast, so this is a little impromptu outro. I wanted to get more OGs than I got on. Unfortunately, I tried to do this show a little bit late. Didn't give people too much time to prepare, 3-4 days. And I know these OGs are busy. They've been in the game for a long time. So I didn't get everyone on, but thanks to everybody who did come on. I really enjoyed Cody, Saftic, and Paul's segment coming in from the middle of Las Vegas. So shout out to them. Shout out to Dan from Half the Battle. Shout out to Carl Marley. All of these guys are OGs. All of them deserve our respect. They came before us, before me, before most of you. So shout out to all of them once again. Hopefully you enjoyed the UFC 300 show. Wanted it to be a little bit longer. Wanted it to be a bit more special with more people, as I said. But I feel like it was still fun. I still had fun speaking to all 3 guys, all 4 guys. And that's it. Good luck on your bets tomorrow. Hopefully UFC 300 can be a massive card. Biggest card of the decade. So hopefully we make the biggest profits of the decade. Shout out to everybody who's watched the show. And good luck on your bets. That's it. Bang.